Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about socialism. Okay, and over the last 100 or so years, there have been about 100 million deaths that have been linked to socialism. So what I want to do is I want to look into is there a connection between socialism and mass murder? Okay, I'm going to focus primarily on the Soviet Union, under Leninism and Stalinism, because during that period there was about 20 million people that were killed there. There was another 20 million people that were killed right next door in China, but we're just going to focus on the Soviet Union for now. So, what were the beginnings of socialism in the Soviet Union? The initial idea was that the factory owners were going to become co-owners of the factory. Okay, so they were going to become like worker owners of their factory. And what very quickly happened is that the factories went from being owned by the workers to being owned by the states. Okay, and these co-owners went back to being workers. Okay, and then from there they went basically to being slaves of the state. And then from there we had the situation where you had about 20 million people that were killed. Okay, so how did they go from one to the other? It's important to understand that this did not happen overnight. There was a slow transition. Okay. Now, when looking at why this would happen, first we got to understand the nature of humans with regard to work. Okay, there's two forces that drive humans. On the one hand, they're lazy. On the other hand, they're greedy. Okay, and I'm going to use myself as an example because I'm 47 years old and I have worked for a lot of different companies. I've been self-employed. I've worked for other corporations. I've worked as a contractor. So I've been in lots of different type of situations where I'm working for people or working for companies. And in some organizations that I was working for, I could get away with doing as little work as possible, and I got paid the same regardless. And that's exactly what I did. I did as little as possible. In fact, what happened is in those type of situations, if I tried to do more work, it was actually frowned upon because what ultimately happened is I made somebody above me, I made them look bad. Okay, so if you produce more than your manager in that type of a situation, you're going to make your manager look bad, and he's going to want to get rid of you. So if you want to survive in that type of environment, okay, in an environment where the company culture or the organizational culture is to produce as little as possible, you have to go with the flow and produce as little as possible so you don't make anybody else look bad. Now, what I found is I ended up not staying in those type of organizations for too long because I'm the type of person that wants to advance and move forward. So I always ended up moving on to different organizations, different companies, where I could work harder, or apply more skill, or do something better, or bring new ideas to the table. Ultimately produce more. Okay, so we'll call it that. I moved on to different organizations where I could produce more, and I was rewarded for it. Okay, so incentive was driving me to seek out opportunities where I could produce more. Okay, the point is that these are the two forces that drive people. Okay, so if we take socialism and we force it against along an entire economy, right, where the entire economy is now running on socialism, okay, there's no chance for there's no incentive to work more. Okay, in fact, you probably look bad if you try to produce more. So the incentive is to try and do as little as possible. What ultimately happens in that type of economy is that production becomes less and less, and what that means is that food, shelter, and clothing become less and less. So ultimately, what happens is that you have a population that you're unable to to feed, shelter, and clothe. Okay, and especially the feeding part is really important, because the feeding part has to happen on a fairly regular basis, pretty much on a day-to-day basis. So what do you do if you have a society with more people than you can feed? Okay, and the natural answer would be to try and produce more, but in this type of situation, in a socialist environment, producing more is not an option because there's no incentive to produce more. So you're stuck with that same level of production. So there's only one alternative, right? There's only one option. You have to get rid of people, okay? So that's the reason why socialism almost always leads to mass murder, because you can't feed the people, so now you have to get rid of them. And there's different, now the selection process can be different, okay? In the Soviet Union, it was more along political lines, okay? In other places, it might be along racial lines, in some places like the Khmer, like with the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, it was along educational lines. If you worked in certain industries, or if you were educated, you were selected for extermination. So it doesn't matter what the selection process is, but ultimately you need to get rid of people, right? You need to get rid of the extra people in a socialist type of society, because you can't produce more food to feed them. So what's your alternative? You got to get rid of them. So that's the reason why I believe that socialism always leads to mass murder. Okay, there's no incentive to produce enough food to feed them, and you have to get rid of those people. So there are my thoughts on that. I think it's important that first of all, we refresh our memory. We need to, there's lots of good videos on YouTube and on the internet and on, other sites that have lots of information about the history of socialism, communism, in both the Soviet Union and in China and other places around the world. We need to refresh our memory, okay, about the history, okay? And then what we need to do is we need to pass this information along, or spoon feed it to the newer generations that did not grow up through the Cold War. Okay, we need to explain this to them, and we need to explain the connection between socialism and mass murder, and why one almost always leads to the other. Okay, so that's our job, and that's the reason why I'm making this video. This is basically kind of pointing you guys in the right direction. Okay, I'm not giving you. I'm actually giving you guys very little information. I'm giving you just enough information, so that you know where to go look. Because I don't want to make this. I'm basically would be an extremely long video if I started going into all the details. But there's lots of information out there. It's our job to kind of bring it to the surface. Okay, and when people are talking about socialism, we need to bring forward these examples and basically say, okay, well, this is what happened in Soviet Union. This is what happened in China. This is what happened in Cambodia. This is what happened in Venezuela. Why do you think that your situation would be any different? Okay, if it's happened this way so many different times in so many different places, what makes you think that if you do this or that or the other thing, it will be any different? The thing that's being discussed nowadays is Medicare for all, basically free Medicare or free healthcare for everybody. Okay, my family came. I was born in this country, but my family came from a place where there was free healthcare for everybody. Basically, the government paid for everything. So what happened there? Well, basically, my grandmother. Okay, this is many years ago, about 20 years ago. When she was sick, right, and she was going to the doctors and the hospitals, they would not pay any attention to her. Okay, they would not pay attention to her until somebody from my family showed up and put some money in the doctor's pocket. That's when they took care of her, and gave her the right medication. And so basically, socialized Medicare in the short run creates a black market, because now the doctors are being paid the same. There's no incentive for them to actually work, so they're not going to work. And if you want the doctor to actually work for you, you have to basically pass some money under the table. Okay, that's how socialized medicine works. Okay, I've seen it. I've experienced it in my family. Okay, but these are things that people don't, this younger generation does not realize. Okay, it's up to us, the older generations that might have some family that have experienced it, to explain to them. So again, we gotta ask. I don't, when I talk to people, especially this younger generation, I try not to force it down their throats. What I try to do is I try to point out historical examples and give them directions to look at, okay, and do their own research and find out and question them, okay. Why do you think that this situation is going to be better from that situation, okay? You say it's going to start out like this, but what's going to stop it from progressing to there? Where's the stop? What's going to stop it? I mean, you want to go from here to here, but what's going to stop it from going to here to there, which ultimately is mass murder? Okay, so guys, thanks for watching. If you like this video, share it, give it a thumbs up. I'll talk to you guys next time.